Hello, this is Yoel again, another video from Hebrew in Israel. Today I want to continue the subject of the name of God. Last time I spoke a little about why is the name being banned in the Jewish world, possible reasons. Now I want to talk about a possible verse in the Torah so that a lot of people actually use to say that the name of God has to be kept away or secret. And we know as the fact that it wasn't practiced in the first temple period, so there must be some kind of a different way of actually explaining this verse. I'm talking about the story about the blasphemer who mentioned the name and then blasphemed, cursed, or something like that. And by the way, blasphemy in mentioning names of deities and then uttering a curse or something is was and is still considered to be one of the highest forms of sin in a lot of cultures. And we have to look at this verse and try to understand it. Now, in this story, basically, there's a man. He seems to have some kind of an argument with an Israelite, and he says the name and he utters something that is demeaning, something which is disrespectful towards God, because the root lekalel, kalal, doesn't necessarily mean to curse, it can also mean to show disrespect. Okay, so for example, when the Torah says, kalel aviv v'imo mot yumat, he who curses his parents, his father and his mother shall be put to death. Lekalel doesn't necessarily actually mean to just say, some kind of a curse or something. It can also actually be um, just showing a sign, speaking in a very disrespectful way. Now, I know that's a bit extreme, but that's a possibility in the meaning of the text. In any case, I'm going to use a visual aid again, and using one of my children's whiteboard. Okay, so it says that he vayikov, okay, and he mentioned the name, and then vayekalel, which is to curse. Okay, and then the next verse says, and this is again, these are verses which are in Leviticus 24, and then we have, and I'm looking at text here, we have in verse 16, it says, "V'nokev Shem Adonai mot yumat." Okay, now the problem starts with the fact that first of all, this word vayikov and this word v'nokev have the same root, which is the root of nakav. Okay, now the problem with the root nakav is that it can mean to pierce, it can mean to mention or to be proclaimed, or actually really to specify, so to mention someone in a specific way, and it can also mean to curse. Okay, and how do we know this? Well, first of all, we have in the story of Bil'am, it says, Ma'ekov lo kabo. Okay? Okay, Ma'ekov lo kabo, elo ma'ezom lo za'am Adonai. And kabo, okay, actually does come from the same root. And here specifically, it means to curse. Okay? And there are some discussions about the exact root, but it's very clear that the root is nakav. Now, the root of nakav here, we know it's nakav because we have a dagesh in the kuf. Okay? I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little dot inside the kuf, so it's the same thing. Here we don't need that dagesh because the nun is actually there. Okay, but the problem is that the previous verse says, Ish ki yekale Elohav v'nasach o. Each man, any man, okay, ish is used to mean any man, who curses his God. It doesn't say the name of God, it says his God, he will bear his, he will carry his, carry the burden of his sin. But then the next verse says, V'nokev Shem Adonai mot yumat. Okay? So a lot of people try to say, well, there's two things here. One that curses his God, and one that mentions the name of his God, or actually basically mentions the name of God, the Tetragrammaton. The problem with that is that we have two different categories of description here. One is the issue of he who curses his God. Okay, that's one form of blasphemy, which means he doesn't actually mention the name of God. He just says something about his God. And If one actually proclaims the name, he actually says the name, he will be put to death. So the second verse, at least the way I understand it, actually means that there are two categories. One of just something about your God in general, and one where you actually specifically say in the name of God. So v'nokev sham Adonai mot yumat. The root nokev here is to mention the actual name, to actually vocalize the letters of the name with its proper vowel points, and simultaneously at the same time or immediately after it, to also say something which is blasphemy, something which is offensive towards God. Okay, so the root nakav actually doesn't mean to necessarily just to mention. Here specifically also means to curse. Okay, so it's not that the verse is forbidding us from actually saying the name. It's actually what it's saying. It's forbidding us from actually blaspheming. Okay, you have the root sometimes of the root nakav to do with mentioning as well, but here specifically there's a clear division between the two types. Okay, and the theme itself, the entire story, is that he mentioned the name and he was cursed. If the problem was just mentioning the name, there would have been a storyline about him mentioning the name and cursing. It would have been just, oh, he said the name. Oh, that's enough. We don't have to go beyond that. But this is what's referred to as a casuistic law. There's a story, or there's a reason, and then there's a judgment. And he can't separate the two from one another. The story of the blasphemer is directly connected to the story, to the law of mentioning God's name and cursing. Okay, so from now on, you have to remember the root nakav can mean to mention, but in this specific context, and again, roots in Hebrew are slightly tricky because you can have words that share roots, but they don't mean the same thing because context is key. Okay, a lot of points in Hebrew is that context is key. So here specifically, it actually means to blaspheme, to mention the name and curse, and not just mention the name. Because it was just mentioning the name, you wouldn't have the previous story about the blasphemer, which is what brings us to this prohibition that's mentioned in the book of Leviticus. I hope this also helps people understanding the subject, because I do know it's a very, very hotly debated subject. And I understand that there are different opinions about this. I think that in this case, the text itself is self-evident what the word actually means, because one of the major problems that happens is people will study individual words and don't study words in their context, and that's actually a big, big mistake. You can't just open up a dictionary and find one definition and run with it. You actually have to look at the context of the word, and this is widely practiced. This is not something I made up. You take um, dictionaries, you take studies on words and everything, you take papers which are written about words, and you notice that the context is sometimes one of the strongest elements that help you understand what words actually mean. So you can research this, you can look at it for yourself, but remember that the one of the issues that comes up a lot is that everyone has an opinion on something, and your opinion can be valid, but it can be only validated when you actually have proof. So I can understand if someone suddenly jumps out of their seat from this video and says, well, Yoel's making something up. Well, you can claim that. Just prove it to me. Okay? Just knowing a couple words or knowing how to find roots and everything is not enough. You actually have to be able to read a text. Okay? So I hope everyone enjoyed this video. I hope this helps develop people's knowledge. And again, if you want to contact me, I have an email, hebrewinisrael@gmail.com, Hebrew in Israel, one word. I also have a Facebook, same name. You can also leave a comment down below. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.